How would the world change for you if you changed the way you see it? Throughout my journey, having achieved nearly $10 million a year in income, and having taken more than 3,000 sales calls throughout my business career, I've been able to develop some very profound conclusions on how people make decisions. However, there is one thing that is completely responsible for how people's lives operate and how their lives completely change. It's all about paradigms, the way in which you see the world, the way you perceive reality. And the way that you look at the world will determine how it will manifest to you. And a simple change of perspective can change everything for you. For example, if you believe money is fundamentally scarce and is a scarce resource, you're always going to struggle to make it. But if you change your perspective to believing that it's abundant, you start to seek evidence to confirm that that is true, and that's how you get rich. And so paradigms can completely shift the course of your life. Let me explain why. So the first thing to understand is, why do paradigms exist and what even are they? Well, a paradigm is basically a lens or a filter that we use, that we have in our mind, that information is filtered through. And that filter changes the way in which we actually see the thing that we're looking at, whether it's an object or an abstract concept. And all human beings have paradigms built and developed around their belief systems, their judgments and convictions. And all these things create the lens in which we perceive reality, and the aggregation of all of our belief systems, judgments and convictions forms our paradigm. And because we seldom question why we live the way we do or why our life is the way it is, we don't tend to realize that we can change. Our belief systems are malleable, our paradigms can shift. And that's why people stay in jobs they don't like. It's why they don't start businesses. It's why they stay in relationships that make them unhappy. So to make this clearer, I want you to imagine a person who's working a standard 9-to-5 job, but feels a strong attraction to starting some sort of online business. However, their current paradigm, shaped by their beliefs, their judgments and convictions around work and life, favors that of a 9-to-5. And this paradigm is rooted in the belief that job stability is the most important thing. And it's rooted in the idea that the standard education system is the only way to live. And maybe this paradigm sees the world of commerce and online business as unpredictable, unsafe, or unsavory. And because the person in question sees the world this way, they won't act out of accordance. Because the way they see the world is that 9-to-5 is safe and business is unsafe. And because the core central thesis of their paradigm is safety, they can't change, no matter how hard they try. And they don't question why they stay in their job. In fact, to an extent, they might even be grateful they have the job, even though it's making them miserable. But only by challenging their paradigm can this person actually step out of the way that they're currently living and move towards something that might be more favorable for them, such as an online business. And so it's not just me that believes this to be true, right? Stephen Covey, the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, literally states in the start of his book that paradigms shape the way we see the world. And that the way that we see the world and the way the world manifests to us is based entirely on our paradigm. And so when do paradigms form? Let's get to the bottom of this thing. Well, it's important to understand that paradigms are formed when we are children. When our brain is most vulnerable to attack from belief systems, judgments and convictions that tend to not be too favorable for our adult life, that is when paradigms form. So let's say that you have a kid, and that kid grows up and it has a bad experience with a dog, and it grows up with a phobia of dogs, and it's now terrified of dogs. And often it's believed that, this kid, it will grow out of it, the phobia will go away, it's just because it's scared. It's scared because it's a child. When it's an adult, it won't have the same problem. However, when they become an adult, the fear of dogs, regardless of all size or breed, tends to continue. Now, even though objectively the human knows the dog is not going to hurt them, this happens because the child created a bad experience or perceived a bad experience, and that continued to flywheel throughout their adult life. And that's how phobias and fears develop. People think that phobias and fears are just some magical thing, but actually they're just paradigms based on usually 1 or 2 things that have happened throughout your life early on that you continue to repeat and drill into your mind until you built your perception of reality. So inevitably, the formation of your paradigm depends heavily on your childhood and how you were raised and the belief systems that you were brought up around. And that's why when, as adults, someone questions a belief we have or questions the way we see the world and asks us to explain why we believe something or why we see the world in a certain way, we struggle to actually even defend our point or explain ourselves. We end up just getting offended, or our ego gets triggered. And that's the sign of someone who has been indoctrinated and their paradigm is not their own. They haven't picked and choose what they believe to be true. Someone else has, and they've latched onto it. People don't have beliefs. Beliefs have people. And we simply grew up with the belief or the judgment or the theory or the hypothesis or the conviction. I believe this is true. Someone asks you why. If you can't explain it, it's because, well, you latched onto something when you were a kid. Maybe you should question that. You know, let's say you're trying to get into a sales career. If your paradigm and your sense of self-worth is that you don't deserve to be rewarded, or that you're not naturally good at sales, then of course you're going to struggle to begin with. And that might be because one person told you one thing one time when you were 5 years old. You wouldn't be able to sell anything, just as a joke. And it just flywheels and flywheels. And if you don't believe me, you want to trace any of your paradigms back to anything, just look at what you were doing when you were 5 or 6 years old, or 4 or 3, or 7. You know, some people think that if they're going to be selling something or salesy, they're going to come across as slimy or swindling someone, and if that's your paradigm of sales, you're never going to be a good salesperson. So you have to look at these things. They hold us back. And that would obviously be a paradigm obtained during childhood. If you have parents that, let's say one time someone calls up your parents' house and it's a cold caller, and your dad answers the phone, he puts the phone down and says, "I fucking hate salespeople. Salespeople are scum of the earth." That's just one thing, and you just repeat that over and over, you remember it over and over. That's the belief that you're brought up around. How on earth are you going to be able to sell anything if that's what you believe to be true? Now, it doesn't mean it is true, but if you believe it, it will be true for you. So this Swiss psychologist, good old Jean Piaget, he basically said that human beings are incapable of objective analysis when it comes to experiences that they're currently experiencing or living in. And that's because we will always interpret them in light of our previous knowledge, which has formed our paradigms. And that is, according to him, everything that happens in our life is conditioned by something else. Either by something we lived through, an experience we had, or someone we saw previously. Everything that we perceive and seems to happen to us is an effect of something that we experienced a long time ago. But although Piaget basically explains that most of our paradigms form in childhood, it's entirely possible for new paradigms to form when you're an adult. For example, you can fall in love, right? Or you can come into contact with the right person, or you can have a really terrible experience with a job that you love. Maybe you love your job, you go to work one day and you have a terrible experience. It's still entirely possible for paradigms to reform and mold as you become an adult. But the real big suckers are the unconscious ones that you form in childhood. Now, something that is also important to know when it comes to paradigms is that there are different types of paradigm. So nowadays, we use the word paradigm to refer to different social perspectives. And in this case, a social or cultural norm or rule can actually be a paradigm for the way that a group of people see the world and how they belong in it. And like personal paradigms, these can also evolve and change over time as, a political consensus becomes more prevalent, or as a specific type of food becomes more prevalent, or diet. We see patterns emerge and paradigms shift when it comes to, groups of people. So let's give an example. Let's consider the case of the emerging female entrepreneur who wishes to start her own digital marketing agency. However, her current paradigm is that women are always going to be at a disadvantage, and women are always going to find an insurmountable level of difficulty when it comes to business because of the way that her mind's been conditioned through society, especially in the digital realm, which is considered to be male dominated. If that's her paradigm and her belief system, she will naturally put barriers in her way, even if they don't exist. So this social paradigm has established rules or norms in her mind, which will cause her to feel fear or doubt when it comes to dealing with her business endeavors. And she believes that she's going to have to fight harder than her male counterparts to become successful. And then it will be more difficult for her to earn the trust and respect of clients and other people in the business. However, as she delves further into the business world, she finds a collection of successful female entrepreneurs who don't struggle with the things that she thought she would. And as she comes into contact with other successful female entrepreneurs who are empowered and who have become successful, her paradigm shifts and her experience completely changes, and she realizes the true nature of the world, and that her gender never would have been an obstacle to her achieving her dreams. Now, am I saying that women don't face more difficulties than men? I don't know, because I'm not a woman. But this is a perfect example of people that I know, women, female entrepreneurs and women that I know who come into business thinking it's going to be significantly harder because of their gender or their sex. And they later uncover that it didn't have to be that way, because there's lots of female entrepreneurs who have fought tooth and nail to produce, results and give them the faith they need. So there's actually a sociologist. His name is Anthony Giddens, and he has this thing called the structuration theory. I think I'm pronouncing that properly. And basically the structuration theory means that changes in social structures. So the structuration theory basically envelops the idea that changes in social structures actually lead to changes in ways of thinking in the paradigms themselves. And that is, human agents, as he could call them, through their thoughts and actions can basically shift the way in which thinking happens. And they basically do this by acting and then shifting the social structure or a specific dynamic, and then through that shift comes the change in actual paradigm. We see politicians do this all the time. So now with that being said, let's actually observe the importance of changing paradigms. Now, although paradigms have always existed and have always cursed humanity, they can be changed. Inevitably, the belief systems and fears and convictions that you adopt as a child will haunt you in your adulthood if you don't become conscious of them. And let's say that as a kid, your mum was always terrified of driving at night. At first glance, that may not be bad, it may not limit you. But what if something really bad happens and one of your family members needs to be rushed to hospital and it's nighttime and you can't drive because of your paradigm? Now that might sound extreme, but in this case, paradigms can specifically hinder you in emergencies. But they happen, and until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. And that's what Carl Jung said. And paradigms are unconscious. It's like, I just don't drive at night. Why? I don't know, I just don't like it. Why? You can probably locate it all the way back to one thing one person said one time or one random thought you had. It's not rooted in efficacy. You live your life through this lens for no critical reason, just because it kind of happened. And so paradigms, they give you the reins of life. They give you control. So there's a book by Thomas Kuhn called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. So according to Kuhn, a human massively inhibits themselves and limits themselves through their paradigms. You know, the belief systems that they developed when they were younger ultimately play their thinking, and sort of they carry that around, and they have that weight through their adult life. And that's why paradigms are so important. Now, let's just say there's a person who's looking to establish an e-commerce store. They want an online business. Now, growing up, this person had entrepreneurial parents, but their entrepreneurial parents were brick and mortar business owners. And the parents would share stories about how online businesses are scams and that they shouldn't be trusted. Well, this entrepreneur who wants to start an e-commerce business, his paradigm fundamentally inhibits his ability to do that, because he thinks that it's going to be a scam and that people are going to think he's trying to scam them. Now, this paradigm might not seem limiting at first glance. Maybe he could just start a brick and mortar store like his parents. But let's say that he is faced with a situation where he's given an opportunity to have incredible product market fit and to have a really unique brand and a fantastic product. But he doesn't capitalize on that opportunity because of one thing his dad said to him when he was 7, which is, online businesses are all scams, son. Don't forget that. And obviously, if that's his paradigm, he's not going to be able to seize the opportunity and change his life. Maybe it stops him from achieving a significant income or reaching a global audience. You can see how this stuff starts to form. And this is why changing your paradigm is essential, and change starts with challenge. You have to challenge why you believe what you believe. Now, I want to focus on how to actually change a paradigm. This is called the power of repetition. Now, the cool thing about paradigms is they can be shifted and changed. And the most important paradigm to develop is that your paradigms are malleable. That's the first thing you have to understand, a paradigm within a paradigm. In recent decades, psychologists have explored how to change someone's mind and how to actually change someone's belief system. And the good news is that it's entirely possible. So there's a psychological concept that you can use daily to basically completely change the way in which you see the world through the power of repetition. Because as experts explain, the easiest way to shift a paradigm or change a behavior is to do the polar opposite. And so if you currently believe that one thing is true, you want to start looking for evidence every single day, as often as you can, that the opposite thing is true. And as you know, an action that we repeat every day is a habit. So habits are how you change paradigms. Therefore, as we develop new habits in our life, new paradigms form. And there can be no change without a change in routine. Now, you might ask yourself, is there a chicken and egg scenario here? Because surely the habit follows the paradigm. But realistically, the only way to change thought is through action. And what will happen is the thought will catch up if the action stubbornly continues. Let's take a woman, for example, called Sarah, who's a talented writer, and she wants to start an online business doing copywriting. However, she just believes that her writing skills are only suitable for physical publishing and wouldn't be good for digital platforms. Well, this paradigm holds her back from launching her business. For Sarah to adopt a new paradigm, she has no choice but to act as if what she believes is not true. And this is difficult to do because it creates cognitive dissonance in Sarah's mind, which is considered painful and uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Maybe she creates social media posts, maybe she starts blogging or something. Just any daily action that she can do to prove that her content can actually get traction online will break the paradigm. And she'll build a new habit by practicing every single day. And as we know, if she's practicing every day, then she will form a habit, and that's exactly what she needs to do. And if we give it enough time, maybe a couple of months, she'll start to get some traction, see some evidence that it is actually true and works, and then she'll have the habit, and then the paradigm will shortly follow. And as she continues to practice and sees positive results through that practice, obviously her mind will change and her paradigm will shift. thus allowing her to actually start her own successful copywriting business online. Study 2009 says it takes 66 days to form a habit. This means if you commit to anything for little more than 2 months every day, it's going to form into your basal ganglia, which is the part of your brain that solidifies habits and where your habits collect, essentially. So realistically, to change your life, you have to change your paradigms, and all you are is 66 days of consistent action away from doing that. This is how you transform your reality. It's not complicated. You don't have to get too woo-wah with it or too crazy. You just have to understand that what you believe to be true is currently holding you back. And the only way to shift that belief is through consistent action in the opposite direction. And this is exactly how I got to $10 million a year with my business. It's how I've done everything in my life. I start with the paradigm, I start with the perception, because fundamentally any business bottleneck you face is actually a belief bottleneck. So in the next video, The Nature of Aim, I'll explain how to have goals, and basically once you've aligned your paradigm, how you can get anything you want. That's everything for now. Subscribe if you're new. Thanks so much for watching. Cheers.